When I started learning no-code automation, I kept hearing about API, JSON, and HTTP request nodes, but I had no idea what any of that meant. I searched YouTube, forums, tutorials, but most of the explanation were either too technical or completely overwhelming. I struggled for days just trying to connect one tool to another. If you have felt stuck or confused by these terms, you are in the right place. In this short video, I'm going to explain these three concepts in plain, simple English. No coding knowledge required. Let's start it with. Hello and welcome. In this 5-minute tutorial for absolute beginners, we will learn some tech jargons and do a quick demo in N8N. By the end, you will know what an API is, what JSON is, why you might use N8N HTTP request node, and how to connect a real API step by step, all without writing a code. Let's jump in it with a simple explanation in plain language. An API is basically a messenger or a bridge. The less different software to talk to each other. Think of it like a waiter at a restaurant. You tell the waiter what you want, the waiter delivers your order to the kitchen and then brings you the results, which is actually the response. In tech terms, when you use an app or a no-code tool to get a data from a service like weather info, the API is what carries your request to that service and returns the data you asked for. In short, an API is how apps and services exchange data and requests with each other behind the scenes. Now that API sends and receives data, we should know about JSON, a common format for that data. JSON is a text-based format for storing and sending data in a structured way. It's basically a way to write that's easy for humans to read and easy for computer to understand. JSON looks like a plain text with a key and values. For example, a person data in a JSON might look like this. Each piece, of, each piece of information has a label, like name and a value Alice. When an API sends back a response, it's often in a JSON format. This means you will get a bunch of text with curly braces and brackets that structure the data, kind of like filling out a form with labels and answers. For a no-code user, you don't need to code JSON. You just need to recognize that it is the format of the data you receive or send. Now, in N8N, most things are done with pre-built nodes. For example, a Google Sheet node to work with a Google Sheet. But what if you want to connect to a service that doesn't have a pre-made N8N node? That's where the HTTP request nodes comes in. The HTTP request node is one of the most versatile nodes in N8N. It allows you to make HTTP calls to any app or services that has a REST API. In simpler terms, this node lets you talk to any API on the internet right from your N8N workflow. For no-code users, this is super powerful. You can connect to thousands of services by just calling their APIs without writing a code, just by configuring this node. Essentially, it should do it all node for when you need something that isn't built in N8N or any automation software. For example, if you have a specific or special database or a new service that N8N doesn't directly support yet, you can use an HTTP request node to send the correct request to that service API and get the data you need. This opens up a world of possibilities while still staying in no-code territory. Now let's bring all together. With a real example, we will use the Tavily API to show how to set up an HTTP request node in N8N. Tavily is basically a web search engine you can use via API. Think of it as a Google for automation. We will find the API docs, get an API key, configure the HTTP request node, and run the test to see the JSON response. Follow these steps. First of all, when using an API, the first step is to read its documentation. This documentation tells us how to format our request. For Tavily, we go to the Tavily docs site. From the docs, we'll learn a few important things. The base URL for request is this, and the available endpoint for searching is /search. The docs also said we need to authenticate with an API key for every request. They even provide an example of the request. For instance, to search for who is Leo Messi, the doc shows a sample using a post request to the /search endpoint with an authorization header and the JSON body containing the query. Don't worry, if that sounds technical, we will do it step by step in N8N. Now, almost all APIs requires a key. Key, what is a key? A special password or a token to include so the service knows who you are. Tavily offers a free API key for its service. To get it, you will have to sign up on the Tavily website and grab your unique API from your account. It usually looks like a string of letters and the numbers. We will need this key in the next step to authenticate our request. Now, back to N8N editor. Add an HTTP request node to your workflow. You can start with a simple trigger like a manual trigger just for testing. We will set up this node to call Tavily's API. Select post because the Tavily search endpoint expects a post request. Enter this URL because this is the full endpoint URL for searching. Then we need to add two headers. In the HTTP node settings, find where to add HTTP headers. Usually a section name headers or similar. Add a header with the name, authorization, and the value where space your API key. This is how we send our API key. Where is just a word that API expects before the key, as shown in Tavily documents. So replace your API key with your key, which we got earlier on from the Tavily. Add another header, name and value. This tells the API that we are sending the data in JSON format. Then body comes. In this node, you will have a section to define the body, the data you send. Make sure it's set to JSON format. We will send a JSON object with our query. For example, for a simple search, you can use query N8N HTTP request node. Here, query is the parameter Tavily expects, and the value is whatever you want to search for. You can choose any search term you like, for example, Tavily API demo or hello world. In N8N's interface, you might either paste a raw JSON or use key value fields to enter query as the key and your search terms as the value. So to recap this configuration, post to http api.tavily/search with two headers set authentication and content type and a JSON body containing our search query. This matches exactly what Tavily documentation expect for a search request. Now it's a moment of truth. Let's run the node and see if it works. The HTTP request will send a request to Tavily's API. If everything is set up correctly, we should get a successful response. In the N8N editor, you will see output data from the node. It will be in a JSON format as we discussed. For example, for a query like who is Leo Messi, the response JSON might include an answer, a brief answer to the question, and the list of search results. Each result could have field like a title and URL. For instance, one results might be like this. Don't worry about the fields right now like score or content. The key thing is we successfully got data back. If your node execution shows a status 200K, which is okay, and some JSON output, congratulations, your API call through N8N worked. Now that we have the data, JSON from the API, what can we do with it? In our example, we got search results from Tavily. As a no-code user, you can now use this data in the rest of your workflow. For instance, you could add another node to take the first result URL and title and send an email with it, or maybe a filter to pick certain information. And N10 will let you reference part of the JSON in subsequent nodes. For example, you might use an email node or a function node to extract the title field of the first result and email it to yourself as a test. The possibilities depends upon what you need. The most important thing is you now have the data from the API inside N8N, and now you can drag drop more nodes to do anything you want to do it, store it, forward it, use in condition, etc. Summarizing whole, we learned that API is a helpful messenger between programs. JSON is a simple format in which data travels, and the HTTP request node in N8N lets you tap into any API without writing a code. We walked through a simple real-life example using the Tavily web search API, from finding the docs and getting a key to setting up the node and getting actual results in JSON. And all of this was done with zero coding, just configuration with no code tool. For an absolute beginner, this is a big step. You have just unlocked the ability to connect your virtually any services on the web that has an API. With practice, you will get more comfortable reading API logs and setting up HTTP request nodes for all sort of tasks. Remember, keep it simple and take it step by step, just like we did here. Thank you for watching this tutorial. Happy automating with the N8N. See you next time.